So, following a flurry of diplomatic activity in Saudi Arabia, a series of coordinated but separately negotiated agreements have emerged between the US, Russia, and Ukraine, centered on reducing military tensions in the Black Sea and pausing strikes on critical infrastructure. At the heart of these developments is supposedly a new maritime security agreement. Ukraine and Russia, through separate negotiations with US officials, agreed to ensure safe navigation in the Black Sea, to eliminate the use of force in those waters, and to refrain from commercial vessels being used for military purposes. Zelensky described this as a Black Sea ceasefire, while Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov emphasized that any unauthorized Russian naval movement outside the eastern Black Sea corridor would be considered a violation of the deal and grounds for Ukraine to invoke its right to self-defense. Now, the parties also once again agreed to a 30-day pause on attacks against energy infrastructure, which mirrors what was spoken about when Trump called Putin and Zelensky. While all sides accepted the deal in principle, violations began almost immediately, with Russia and Ukraine accusing each other of continued strikes. The agreement lacks transparency and enforcement mechanisms, which is a major problem here, and it is deepening mistrust between all parties. Meanwhile, the US remains publicly silent on Russia's apparent breaches of the ceasefire, likely not out of support for Russia, but to avoid drawing attention to the fact that yet another deal that was brokered by them has been broken. Now, this maritime agreement echoes the earlier Black Sea Grain Initiative brokered by the UN and Turkey in 2022, which collapsed when Russia exited in 2023 over complaints that it wasn't able to export its own food and fertilizer due to sanctions-related restrictions. Now, what's notable now is that the new understanding includes a reciprocal trade element. The US has agreed in principle to help restore Russia's access to global agricultural and fertilizer markets, including lowering maritime insurance costs and improving access to ports and payment systems. Now, understand that when I say the Trump administration will help restore those things I mentioned for Russia, it's not that they're going to restore them unilaterally or have the authority to do that, because many of these sanctions are congressionally mandated. So when Trump says he's going to help restore it, it sounds like he's going to try to lobby Congress to lessen these sanctions, or perhaps lobby American allies to do the same in their countries. But the Kremlin has been far more explicit in its demands. It's been quite bold here, insisting that the pause in fighting won't begin until key sanctions are lifted, particularly those affecting Russia's agricultural bank and its reconnection to the SWIFT payment system. So basically, Putin is playing a mafia boss here. He understands that this ceasefire is something Trump wants as a feather in his cap. So he is no longer negotiating with Ukraine. He's negotiating with the United States and using Ukraine as leverage, basically as hostages. Putin is essentially saying, I'm going to keep killing Ukrainians unless you, United States, give me what I want. Putin is basically a surrounded bank robber with hostages in the building with him, and if his demands aren't met, he's going to start killing those hostages, or in this case, keep killing Ukrainians. So Putin has no interest whatsoever in stopping this war, and I've maintained this for a while now, because the war itself is leveraged to get concessions from the United States. The war itself is what keeps Ukraine from joining NATO. So he's not seeking concessions or dealing with Ukraine at this point. He's seeking concessions from the US and the US-led world order. He's also seeking the US to pressure Europe to acquiesce as well. And like I said, Putin knows that Trump wants to get this ceasefire deal done, so he's going to continue to pressure Trump. He's not going to continue to pressure Ukraine, because if you notice, his demands all deal with what is happening on the economic side of the Euro-American house, not on the military side with Ukraine. So in the end, what's unfolding here is not diplomacy, it's Russian coercion. Putin isn't negotiating peace, he's weaponizing the war itself, turning Ukrainian lives into bargaining chips to extract economic relief from the United States and its allies. The Black Sea ceasefire, the energy pause, the grain corridor, all of it is theater designed to buy leverage, not peace. And with the Trump administration appearing eager for headline-grabbing deals and eager to concede things away that they shouldn't have been early on, Putin is playing to that desperation. He's not dealing with Ukraine as an equal adversary. He's holding a gun to its head while making demands of Washington. Until the US and its partners recognize the Kremlin is not engaging in diplomacy but in hostage-taking on a geopolitical scale, every agreement will be little more than a temporary illusion, broken as quickly as it's signed and paid for with Ukrainian blood.